10th March, 1884. Yesterday was immensely busy, and I unfortunately did not have time to write out the results of our interview with Ms Marsterson. Strangely, I also have little memory of the events of the 8th, other than that I ventured to the library and spent the majority of the day there. I have read through my journal entry, but do not recall writing it. Anna tells me I spoke little and muttered almost constantly upon my return, as though beset by a plague of thoughts. I recall none of this. Nonetheless, it is of little importance to the matter at hand. I will do my best to detail the interview with Ms Marsterson as it happened from the scant notes I was able to take at the time. We left Anna's apartment after a small breakfast some time around 10 in the morning. The day was overcast, cold and windy, so even the short walk to Miss Masterson's flat was unpleasantly long. When we arrived, Mrs. Downey was, again, waiting for us. "Oh," she said, her eyes narrowing upon catching sight of us, red-faced and sniffling from the cold as we entered. "It's you, then, is it?" "Yes, it is we," Anna affirmed. "You would be so kind as to tell Miss Marsterson we are here to see her? It is very important." Mrs. Downey sniffed haughtily, but did indeed waddle her way upstairs without another word to us. I could only assume we were meant to wait there until she returned for us. "So," I said to Anna while we waited, "what's your plan?" "Plan?" said Anna. "I plan to tell the truth, Leslie." "And if she throws me out onto the street?" Anna shrugged. "Your coat is warm," she replied offhandedly. "I do not think you will freeze." "But if she should refuse to speak with you?" "I do not think she will. Old women, they love to speak with young women. These things I know, Leslie." I squeezed her hand. "I trust you, Anna," I told her. She smiled at me. Mrs. Downey returned then, thudding ponderously down the stairs. "She's up in flat 12, she told us brusquely. "But don't be taxing her. I ain't having to deal with her tantrums." We thanked the landlady and headed upstairs, I resolving to let Anna handle this situation since she seemed the better prepared of the two of us. The door to flat 12 was open, just a crack, but the smell from within still reached us with alacrity. It was a smell of decay, of mothballs and lavender, of mildew and lye. The smell reminded me powerfully of the last time I had seen my own grandmother, as she lay on her deathbed, visiting with us for the final time. I had been, 9 years old, but the match between the smells was so exact that I was nearly transported back to that moment. Anna seemed unaffected, for which I was grateful. I was also grateful I had already decided to allow her to take the lead in this interview, for I doubt I could have managed it myself. Inside the flat itself, the smell was almost overpowering. Miss Masterson herself sat by the window, which was unmercifully closed, crocheting amidst the decay of her many belongings, which cluttered the room in mouldering, dust-snowed heaps. "Who's you, then?" she asked pointedly, as soon as we had entered. Her voice was like the screech of a hawk. "I am Anna Ivanovna Maximiuk," Anna said, "and this is Mr. Leslie Fletcher." The old woman looked up sharply, and fixed me with a gaze that might have killed small animals. "Fletcher, d'ye say? Same one what my Jory near kilt nigh 2 months past?" I cleared my throat nervously. "Indeed, madam, the same." She cackled like a witch. "Come to take my old soul too, then? Ne'er thought the devil hisself would bother with the likes of me." She looked back to her crocheting with a complacent, somewhat smug smile.
Mr. Fletcher. You may notice the cross hanging over your head.
I looked up, startled. There was, indeed, a crucifix quite large enough to nail a man to, suspended precariously over our heads.
I'd like to take the time to tell you that if you take one step towards me, it'll come crashing down on your head before you can even cry out to your devil.
I opened my mouth to speak, but Anna put a hand on my arm. We understand, Ms Marsterson. We are not come here to harm you, only to ask questions. My Leslie, he tries to escape the old house, tries to break the curse of his family. We only want you will help us. She raised an eyebrow.
Now is it you've come to fall in with this devil? She asked.
Anna shrugged. I too have seen the red door, she answered. For a moment it seemed that the whole world had gone silent. The quiet clicking of Miss Masterson's crochet needles halted instantly. For a breathless instant I could hear only the beating of my own heart.
Ah, so that's what it is, she breathed at last. If it's that door you're inquiring of, it's aught I can tell you.
Surely you must know something, Anna pressed. If you did not, you would not think Leslie is devil, or even know what it is I mean when I say red door. Miss Masterson shook her head.
Legends, girl. Legends and old family stories. And not ones I'll be telling with him in the room.
Anna looked at me imploringly, then turned to Miss Masterson and said, Then I shall send him away. The old woman cackled again.
All right then, girl, and if you're wise, you'll never send for him to come back.
Anna gently touched my shoulder, an apologetic look on her face, and with a resigned sigh, I walked from the room, closing the door behind me. It was nearly 20 minutes later that Anna finally emerged from Miss Masterson's flat, looking oddly pale and stricken. I inquired after what had so changed her demeanor, but she only shook her head and walked past me without a word. I followed after her, unsure if I was welcome or if Miss Masterson had told her something so irreparably horrible that it would estrange me from her forever. However, she did not seem to mind my tagging along after her, and so I followed, wordless, and prayed for the best. We were all the way back in Anna's apartment before she said the first word to me. The door was in its place downstairs, and the sight of it had given me chills all over. When Anna did speak, it was thus that she spoke in hushed tones, looking out of her small window with a distant look upon her face. History of Fletcher home. It is not what I expect, she said. Ms Marsterson's tale, it is grisly, Leslie, and very gruesome. I do not know that you will wish to hear it. Believe me, Anna, I am prepared for the very worst, I told her. It could not possibly be so horrible as the formless terrors my imagination is conjuring for me now. This, taken down upon my notepad even as she retold it to me, was the story Anna heard from Miss Masterson. It was many, many years ago. The old woman wasn't sure how many, but possibly more than a century. Miss Masterson's grandmother, Eileen Master, had been the sole proprietor of the house at that time. She was a young widow and kept mainly to herself, and for this reason many marriageable and greedy men set their eyes upon her estate and her fortune, caring little that they might have to marry the woman in order to get at it. One such suitor was my own great-great-grandfather, Charles Raleigh Fletcher. He made many approaches upon Eileen Master and refused to take no for an answer. He promised her many things, even true love, but she saw the greed, behind his charm and refused to have any of it. In a fit of vengeful spite, having been rejected once too often, Charles Fletcher crept into the Master house. For so it was then. Late one night, and took Eileen Master where she slept, forcing himself upon her with a knife to her throat so she would not fight or scream. When the deed was done, he asked once more if she would not marry him. She refused. He flew into a towering rage and cut the poor woman's eyes out with his knife, vowing that no other man should ever want her if he could not have her. Many months passed, and it became clear that Eileen Master was with child. Although she was even more isolated than before, withdrawing into her house, she still required groceries and errand boys, servants to clean and cook for her since her sight had been so brutally taken. So word got out of her condition. Charles Fletcher arrived once more, offering his kind support if only she would marry him. She told him, and these are Ms Marsterson's exact words, that he could go straight back to hell, devil that he was. Charles Fletcher only smiled and told her she would one day come around to his way of thinking. The child was born not too much after, and the unfortunate Eileen Master died not long after that. Ms Masterson seems to believe it was the interceding hand of Charles Fletcher that caused the woman's death, at least indirectly. She first, however, named her child Gregory James Masterson, refusing to give him the name Charles Fletcher had so disgraced in her. The child was raised by his aunt, told horrifying tales of the torments Charles Fletcher had inflicted upon his mother. Thus, the familial hatred grew and was passed to the next generation. When Gregory Masterson had grown into a man, Charles Fletcher, now a rich and successful businessman of middling age, approached him about the sale of his ancestral home, for it was well known that the Masterson family was in dire straits financially. Gregory Masterson told Charles Fletcher that he could take his money and, I again quote Miss Marsterson, stick it where the sun don't shine. Charles Fletcher warned that if Gregory would not sell him the house, he would take it by any means necessary. Gregory had him forcibly ejected from the premises. Within a year, rumors of witchcraft inside the Master house had begun to spread like wildfire. It was no doubt the whispering mouth of Charles Fletcher that began the rumor, and the keen ears and wide popularity of his son, my great-grandfather, that caused it to spread so. Investigations were launched, but Gregory Masterson refused to allow probing inquisitors to enter his home. He sent his daughter away to boarding school, reading well the climate of the city, and it was well done, too. Not 6 months later, the public were whipped into a riot of insane vehemence and stormed the Master house, burning it to a shell and killing all of the occupants. Charles Fletcher, of course, swooped in to claim the ruins and used his not inconsiderable fortune to rebuild it to his liking. The Masterson girl turned out to be Ms Marsterson herself, unmarried grandmother of Jory Masterson, only recently returned to London, preferring instead to make her living in the countryside. The Fletchers have held the house ever since, and even Miss Marsterson herself had not a single guess as to what had made Charles Fletcher so manically obsessed with possessing the old house. I do not need her guesses. I know. The Red Door had cast its spell upon my great-great-grandfather and all of my family since. Perhaps my parents had tried to shield me from it. Perhaps they only died before they could reveal its terrible secrets to me. It matters little. Though Anna claimed this was only a family story unsupported by fact and reality, I know it to be true. The blood of Charles Raleigh Fletcher runs in my veins, and I know, somehow, strangely, that if someone were to try to keep me from that house, I would do all in my power to regain it. God, what am I saying? No, let the house be burned to the ground. Let the red door be forever destroyed. Let me be freed of that horror, that unknown terror that lurks so complacently in my basement. Let it be forever sealed and the mystery abandoned. Let the door come to the ruin it has brought upon so many others. Let me be the one to bring it.